Welcome to Wine Talks with Paul Kalemkiarian, where you can find your favorite podcast on Spotify, Google Play, iTunes, or wherever you hang out for your podcast. And of course, the Wine Talks is sponsored by the Original Wine of the Month Club, now sporting the Pure and Biodynamic Wine Club, where we deliver organic and biodynamic wines straight to your door. This is really going to be a fun conversation because the subject of cognac and brandy, it's convoluted. People don't understand. I have questions myself about it. And we have Charles Braastad. I'm not going to say it the French way.
That's perfect. It's perfect.
He is here from Delamain, which is a family-owned still, right? Family-owned.
It's not completely family-owned, but it's owned by two families.
By two families, yeah. Okay. So, but in the realm of cognac and Armenian and all the big brandy houses of France, it's still a smaller organization compared to what people might see.
Yeah, it's very tiny company with less than 20 people working at Delamain. So it's
It sounds like this company.
it's like a small Burgundy winery or a small Bordeaux chateau. It's very small.
That's incredible. Yeah. So, I want to just talk a little bit about your history and what you've done. I read a little bit online about your trip to Scotland to do some things, but tell me a little bit about how Delamain became part of the family and how you got involved with the cognac house.
Well, my family is a lot involved with Delamain because my grandmother was a Delamain. So I'm a descendant of James Delamain, who founded the company. So it's still this is very important. My father used to run the company, so when I was a kid, I always was hanging around. Yes, but it's really when you join the company, you really work and you really understand everything. So it's not like I could taste cognac at 6 years old or anything like that. I really started when I joined the company more than 20 years ago. It was a good move. I'm happy with that.
Downstairs, I have on the wall, I have painted an old poster from Béziers, and it talks about allowing children of 4 years old to drink wine as long as you add water to it. It's okay. Mm-hmm. So they didn't do that in cognac when you were.
No, I don't know which was my first drink. If it was champagne on my lips when I was baby or cognac.
Okay,
I don't know. I don't know. I haven't been. No, but I don't really do that with my kids today. But we try to be aware about our sense, and especially the nose. The nose is very important for us. We taste with our nose. It's really something we work from a very young age. So open your nose. It's really something I will say to my daughters.
Based on the size of my nose, that you think I'd be pretty good at this, right? So when did the cognac house start? Was it your grandmother that started it, or is it prior to that?
Oh, no, it's prior to that. Well, the original house was called Rançon and Delamain, and it's back to the 18th century. The company today, with the statute today, is from 1824, so it's a little bit more recent, but the roots are going back to the 18th century.
And it's the same place, same location.
Same homes, and nearly same cellars. There must have been some cellars rebuilt, but we are the same place near the river in Jarnac, which is a small town close to Cognac, in Charente. Yes,
that's fascinating. That's fascinating. And so the Delamain family began in the 18th century, or that became a little later. What is?
No, they began. Well, the first Delamain working in the company was called James Delamain. He's my great 9-time grandfather.
Wow!
And he was traveling to discover France. He was in Bordeaux, in Cognac. He was visiting some supplier of his father, based in Ireland, and he met this young lady in Jarnac, who he fell in love with. And 2 years later, he married this lady, and the father of this lady was doing some cognac, was producing some cognac. So James became partner with a company called Rançon. The company became Rançon and Delamain in 1762. And this is where he started to develop the business. He was Irish, so speaking English, could travel, develop the business. And at the end of the 19th century, at the end of the 18th century, in 1800, when he died, Rançon and Delamain was one of the leading cognac company in the region.
Wow.
Small compared to a big business today, but it was. Unfortunately, he had, when he died, he had 9 children, and it was fortunate to have 9 children, but he could not keep the business going on with 9 children. He had to stop the business, sold and give away some of the cellar. And it's one of his grandson who started the business again in 1824. So it's on the remain of François and Delamain. He built Roulet and Delamain with some cousin, and this is really the origin is 18th century, but the legal statue are from 1824, which is nearly 200 years old.
Yeah,
so it's not bad.
That's old in anybody's book when it comes to a family-run business. So, do you grow your own grapes, or you buy the grapes?
We are négociants. We are slightly opening our mind and our activities, because we just start to cultivate a vineyard from this year.
Really? Wow.
So we used to have vineyard until the 1920s. We sold the vineyard, and then we are renting right now. We are farming a vineyard, and we have some interesting projects. So it's back to the roots. But in Cognac, it's really the big house, they don't own a lot of vineyard. It's you need to have different origin to be able to have a consistent blend. So if you have your 20-40 hectares of vineyard, you are not able to have a consistent blend at the end. It's different from wine.
To keep it consistent, the profile that I'm used to when I drink Delamain, let's say pale and dry, you need a variety of sources of grapes and continued selection. Uni Blanc?
Uni Blanc, Colombard, Folle Blanche. There is there is a little bit more grape variety you are allowed to use, but it's 98% is Uni Blanc. So there is not a lot of traceability. When you buy a 20 years old cognac or a 40 years old cognac from a grower, you have no certificate that it's Uni Blanc or Colombard. It's lost in the process. Even so, it's interesting, but it's distillation will change the thing anyway. You will find some old Folle Blanche, but you have no proof. Talking about old cognac, you have no proof.
You know what it is.
Now with our property, we want to. We have some Colombard, and we want to make sure that we can identify the lots aside from the other one. So it's something which is very recent.
It's interesting because you can buy, for instance, Grappa, that's Grappa de Sangiovese, Grappa de Cabernet, and it seems to me generally that the distillate, the grape that's being distilled, once it's distilled 2 or 3 times, how much influence it really has over the character of the distillate.
It has influence, but I think it's the information was just lost.
They
just didn't care. It was.
And so. The difference between Cognac and Armagnac, the only difference I understand is the type of still that's used to process it. But is that accurate?
It's more than that.
It's more than that.
It's like Bordeaux and Burgundy,
Oh, it is? Okay.
Well,
that much different.
It's not the same ground, not the same people, not the same, but still indeed, not the same climate.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of difference. It's a cousin. It's the same produce. It's the same idea behind it.
Yep.
It's making a wine, distilling it, aging in old cask or aging in wood cask. But then so many things are different that at the end you don't have the same product. Even so, you can be full. And blind tasting a good Armagnac and a good old Cognac, it's
pretty hard.
Yeah, I would not put my hand on a bet.
It's hard to do even with wine for sure. So tell me about the terroir then. So the terroir even with Champagne, for instance, because of the bubbles, I find it more difficult to detect the terroir. And it sounds like as well with a distilled product like Cognac or Armagnac or any other brandy from around the world, that the actual terroir character, the minerality of the shale or wherever the grapes are being grown, is hard to detect. Is that accurate, or can you?
No, we can detect it. We can get it wrong, but most of the time you have a general line that you can detect.
Yes.
There is 6 different growth in Cognac, 6 different terroirs, or cru as we call it in French.
Yeah.
And it's like the same in every wine region, or in every even in Armagnac there is different growth, different terroir. In Cognac there is we start with the Grand Champagne, which is called the premier cru du Cognac, the first growth, the one which is the most prestigious, and the one we are specialized in, Grand Champagne. So same word than in Champagne, but we are far away. It's not the same region, but it's just the same soil, very chalky soil, who gave the Latin word Campania, who became champagne in French.
Yeah, right.
So Grand Champagne, then you have Petit Champagne, which is the second growth.
Ouais.
And then you've got Borderie, Bon Bois, Borderie, Fin Bois, Bon Bois, Bois Ordinaire. So, but it's very rare when you walk in a liquor store in the States and you take a bottle of cognac, you barely see the origin. So it's like the grape variety.
Yes.
Most of the time, the terroir is lost in the communication.
But because of the general broad marketing of the larger brands, because I don't think I've ever seen, particularly let's say in a VS, that they would even represent that. But you would absolutely want to represent Grand Champagne.
Yeah, exactly. But we are working in a very tiny market, representing less than 3% of the cognac market in the States.
Yes, right.
We do only Grand Champagne and only old cognac, and this is very, very tiny part of the production.
So if you see on a label, if you scour the label, you look for every detail you can, but the biggest plot of land it represents is cognac. We're talking about the largest
cognac, 180,000 acres. So it's a big vineyard. It's the biggest vineyard of white grape variety in the world. So it's a massive vineyard. So this is already an indication against other brandy.
Yes.
Cognac means it's produced in France between Bordeaux and Loire Valley, and you have already a guarantee of appellation there.
Right.
But then if you find the second information, which is where it's coming from in cognac, it's already a good sign.
Yes, it's becoming more exclusive and more representative of what it's supposed
to
be.
Is it Grand Champagne? Is it Fin Champagne, which is a combination of Grand and Petit Champagne?
Yes.
This is interesting.
Fin Champagne.
Fin Champagne is not a terroir, it's a blend.
It's a blend.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
That is news. I love that. I had to write that down. So when you're picking grapes for the Uni Blanc or the Colombard, in Champagne, you pick them young, so they're acidic and there's less sugar. Is there a particular time where the grapes are best for cognac as far as their ripeness is concerned? Is there a regular 23 bricks, whatever?
No, we need acidity.
We need acidity.
Uni Blanc is the same grape variety that the Italian Trebbiano, but we are much, much further north. So this grape never became really ripe. And you've got a lot of acidity, and this is what we need. So the harvest will be this year in about 10 days on the property we cultivate, which is not especially late. It's quite early for the cognac.
Yeah.
So we are looking for acidity, and we are looking for a low alcohol percentage, about 9-10% alcohol. So it's very low.
In the grape?
Yeah. In the grape.
Wow, that is low.
But we got a huge crop. It's big. It's a massive. It's a Uni Blanc and make a huge grape. It's nothing like Pinot Noir or very small.
So that's fascinating. So now we've got the grapes growing. We've got a lot of production from the grapes. You're harvesting a little earlier. Is that because of the climate change?
This affect? It used to be mid-October, end of October. Yeah, it does affect us.
Wow. So we distill them. We crush them. We ferment them first.
Yeah, we ferment them. We make a wine from the juice. This is important.
So how much influence does the fermentation process have over the final distillate?
Well, it has to be well done.
Yes.
But you don't gain. Well, when you want to understand cognac, you have to forget everything you know about wine, and especially fine wine.
Easy for me to do.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure it's so easy because your questions are really driven by your knowledge of wine.
Yes.
And indeed, fermentation in cognac, it has to be well done, but your 60 years old cognac is not going to be great because of the fermentation.
Back then.
It's just one element which has to be well done,
right.
But it's not.
So when you're done distilling it, when you've fermented it, now you have, I suppose with grapes that have less sugar, you're going to have less alcohol in the overall percentage. Maybe it's 7-8% alcohol or something like that.
Yeah, 9,
a little
9
more.
10. Yeah.
Okay, and then now you distill it off, and
so harvest mid-September this year. It will take the month of October to make the wine, and the 1st of November we are allowed to start to distill. So it's limited in time. We can only distill from 1st of November until the 31st of March next year.
Wow.
And this is limited. This is something which is important also, because you are not allowed to add anything to preserve the wine. You have to distill it when it's fresh and still young.
No sulfur, no nothing.
No, especially not sulfur, because it will go through the distillation and you will have it in your glass at the end. So
interesting.
This is not. So distillation will be done in winter in France, and there is a local distillery who will do that. It's a very important. This is really when the heart of the wine will be taken and concentrate, and to make the eau de vie cognac. So from the 10% wine, we will produce a 70% alcohol spirit. So by double distillation.
70%.
Yeah.
It's
a double distillation. This is a very important difference with most of the Armagnac, which are single distilled.
Yes. You run it through twice.
Yeah, we distill twice.
So the rest is the 30% is water, or is it other things?
No, it's very little bit of other thing and water.
Yeah. So the quality of that distillate now goes into now you're starting to determine the quality of this particular. I'm going to say batch, but vintage of distilled wine, and now it goes in the barrel.
Yeah. Once you have the white spirit running from the pot still, you've done maybe 25% of the job in terms of quality. This includes the vintage, the fermentation, the way you drive your vineyard, distillation, fermentation. This is 25% of the quality. This will explain 25% of the quality. Then you have to stock it and to age it in a barrel, French oak by law, and this will bring another 25%. And the next 25% will be brought according to Delamain. I mean, it's not scientific what I'm saying. It's just to give you an idea of the importance of each element. So the next 25% will be brought by the cellar itself. Is it humid? Is it dry? Is it close to the river? Is it an old one? Is it a new one? Is it it has a good smell? How is it going to react depending on the season? This is very important. And the last 25% that you need to have is the time. I mean, a 10 years old cognac, a 25 years old cognac, a 60 years old cognac, this is very important. It makes completely different cognac.
So the barrel, so it's in barrel now, which is going to be a component of its quality is how long it's in barrel and the type of barrel you put it in. Yeah. And you mentioned downstairs you put it in a neutral barrel. Is something that's been spent already?
No, it's not really neutral. It's still wood, but what we don't want is excess of wood.
The wood flavor.
Especially for Delamain, we are producing this quality called pale and dry, and this pale style of cognac, which is very pale in color, is made with these old casks that we buy in the second hand from other cognac house. To make a VS, which is basically a 2 years old cognac, you need a lot of wood, lots of tannin in your cognac, lot of color, lot of taste.
Yes.
But we produce cognac which are above 20 years old, and we don't want to have this young, harsh tannin in our cognac. So it's not neutral. It has a big impact. We couldn't do without it. So we need those old barrel, and they are very well selected.
I have some barrels across the parking lot here that maybe. I'm kidding.
No, I haven't seen that.
So in California, when you make wine, there's about 75 additives that you can put in it. It can be color, it can be grape sugar, it can be all kinds of things to influence what you end up with. Which we, obviously in the world of fine wine, we prefer not to do anything. Mm-hmm. But in the rules of cognac, you mentioned that there's rules that you have to have French oak as far as the barrels are concerned. Are there any? I understood by cheaper brandies, maybe it's just brandy, maybe it's not cognac, that they put color in it.
Well, color is a big word. Big words. There is 3 things you are allowed to add. There is burnt sugar, which is caramel, which is color, which gives the color, which will allow a younger cognac to have this very nice amber color, or to add that to which will be added to have consistency in color also. There is sugar syrup. When you have a very young cognac, you have a lot of harshness brought by the young tannin, and you have to cover that with sugar. So it's part of the recipe. It's not tons of sugar; it's a couple of percentage, but it's not taboo. It's just something that is not it's not ingredients. I mean, it's part of the recipe.
Yes,
you have to do that.
Like a gin, it's part of the recipe.
And then you've got water to reduce the strength.
Right, because you've already got 70% alcohol.
Yeah.
When it comes out of the barrel, what's the percentage?
So depending on the age, you lose 3% of pure alcohol per year by evaporation, just because the alcohol go out of the cask.
Right.
After 20 years, you're still at 50%, but after 60 years, you reach 43, 44%. So when you do a 10 years old cognac or 20 years old cognac, you need to add water.
Yes.
So at Delamain, we have this very specific policy. Our product is called pale and dry. So our customer, and it's written on the label, pale and dry. So our customer doesn't expect a colored cognac, a dark cognac. And we produce indeed the palest cognac in the cognac business. So we don't use a lot of caramel. We will just use a little bit of caramel to make sure that all our bottles have the same color.
Yes.
So in your shop, people see and they don't have to choose between one bottle. It's the same.
Something wrong with this.
On our label, we say dry, so people don't expect to have a sweet taste. And our cognac are not sweetened. They have this natural dryness. There is a natural sweetness coming from the fiber of the wood, but there is nothing added. And water is not directly added, but we use a very weak cognac at 15% alcohol to reduce and to adjust the percentage to 40%. It's a lot of tradition, not a marketing campaign I'm explaining there.
No, right.
It's something we do for 200 years old, and it's a way we like our cognac to be very elegant, to have this mouth, which is very... unsweetened. It's not dry. We call it dry.
I sense zero sugar. I mean, when you taste these things,
it's not. It's a sweetness, but it's not a sticky sugar like you have when eating a sweet.
Because just the quick tasting we did, the range was the pale and dry, which I enjoyed very much. It had a very sort of fine sherry weight to it, up to your most valued bottle, which was the reserve, and that had a wonderful viscosity and complexity to it. And so all the way up the line, you felt different things going on.
Yes.
I'm fascinated by that, because it would seem to me it's hard to get that character out of a distilled spirit versus fermented. But tell me a little bit about. I get a lot of questions and a lot of conversation about this idea of VSOP, and XO, and so. And what I've studied over the years, that there's no definition for that in cognac. It's what each house has its own sort of description of what a VS or VSOP. In other words, I can't take a VSOP from one brand and compare it to another one.
Oh, yes, you can.
Except from.
You can.
So tell me about that. That's
well, there is a legal definition of VS.
There is.
VS means very special, and it contains cognac which are aged for minimum 2 years. This is the law.
That's a law.
Then one brand can decide to put some 4 years or for some 6 years old cognac inside, but the minimum is 2 years.
2 years.
VSOP is 4 years, and XO by law is 10 years minimum. Then every brand will have its own policy, its own style, and will search to achieve the best XO they can. So it will be sometime 20, 30 or more, depending on the company. But legally, and the control of aging done by the cognac administration go until 10 years.
Okay, so there's a minimum, but they could do better if they wanted to. So if their VS was on the shelf and it had a little bit more age, or a little more blended with some older versions of the same thing, then they can do that if they want. Okay, so that's great.
What is not legal is to put any age. So this is a big difference with other brandy you can see on the market. You cannot put an age until you can prove it's exactly the truth. You can't do average. You can't put the youngest or the oldest. You can't put an age. You can only put age if your cognac is a vintage cognac. What we do, we have some vintage cognac, which are casks which have been sealed or locked by the administration. So it's our cognac, but we have no access to it. It's the administration who follow the aging and control the age. But apart from that, there is no way you can.
That's interesting. So what's the oldest vintage cognac that Delamain has in the store?
Well, we start in 1960s. So we have, I think it's 1963 will be the oldest. It's not even in cask anymore. It's in a big glass bottle called Demi-John.
Really?
And it would be the last.
Is it available to guys like me, like to get a bottle of it with my name on it?
But I'm afraid we keep it for
the
souvenir. We keep it for our library, and we don't sell it anymore.
So I'm fascinated, and I've seen vintage cognacs come through here before, but when you mention that you get a lot of evaporation, and so the alcohol content goes down as time goes on. So what would be the raw alcohol content of something like a 1963, like 40%, you were saying?
Yes, it will be a bit more than 40, between the 42, 46%.
And so,
and we don't reduce it; we will just bottle it like that, for instance.
Really, you won't add anything to it. Since you spent time in Scotland and you were around the distilleries and you the advent of single malt Scotch, and which I have a hard time drinking, frankly, particularly the smoked, the peaty ones. Really, I like Laforac.
Yeah, Laforac. Yeah.
Oh, she's brutal.
I like it.
Yeah, it's great. You have to have a taste for it, but they sell the idea that this is 15, average 20, 50. What's the Balvenie or one of them is a 50-year-old blend or something that they serve. Does that carry value in the cognac world? In other words, I'm going to pay a lot of money for a Scotch that's 50 years old. It's labeled that way.
Yeah.
Does the value for 1963, if it's available, is it going to be astronomical?
Not as much as whiskey, I'm afraid.
Whiskey,
I'm very sad about that.
No, but sad about that. I don't want to open an old wound, but because strictly it's not understood as much, or because
because it's not known, because we are one of the 2 or 3 companies who do vintage cognac, and not as many. when you look at this single malt, there is very strong company who can make a big advertisement, and it's known to be $10,000, $40,000 the bottle. So people are jumping on it. But you can find a bottle of Delamain 1988 for I don't know, $400 or $500. So it's nothing in comparison.
That's interesting, because
go for it. It's time to go for it, because the market is going to change.
And I think cognac is a proper place in the course of a meal and after dinner. My wife now is very much enjoying cognac after dinner while we're shutting down for the day. I think it's a very important beverage, as it were. So it ages, but the public doesn't understand it. And tell me about the public throughout the world. Like the United States, surely the East Coast and the West Coast are different consumption habits, right? I mean, the West Coast, I'm guessing for you, the East Coast is far more voluminous in volume for the sales of cognac.
Well,
Delamain. I'm shocked at that.
For Delamain, it's not really the case, but for cognac, yes.
So how about other parts of the world? Like we were talking about Russia, the Armenian. We were talking about the Armenian thing briefly, and I'll get into that in a second. But when Armenia was a Russian-owned country, they were told, "You're going to make brandy for the rest of the Soviet Union. That's your job. In Georgia, you're going to make wine." So it seems to me that part of the world would be rather oriented toward brandies and cognacs and armagnacs. Is that a good market for Delamain?
Eastern Europe is very good. Russia is very good. Armenia is not so good. The American Armenian are very good for cognac.
Yeah, they are. They are.
They are. But they have a taste for brandy. Yeah, all the ex-communist country they have this taste for cognac, which is interesting.
So China, Asia.
Yeah, Asia is big, and China is big. They have a big taste for cognac. They like it very much. They are used to Beiju, which is very high in alcohol. So when they drink cognac, it's like milk for them, and they love it. Of course, we have the big our big leaders, which are the big cognac company, which make a lot of work for us, for a small company, because they advertise a lot. So the Chinese people are learning a lot about cognac, about cognac, and they have a good taste for it. So it's everybody enjoy the.
Is there a time you've been there 20 years, and the family's been around for 100 or so? Is there a time when cognac, the consumption of cognac and the public persona of cognac has really peaked, and then because of the generations it changes? Like, for instance, the millennials now, no one can understand them. We don't get them. We don't know what they drink. No one really sure. Do you see there are periods in time where cognac was a preferred beverage after dinner versus today?
It's the biggest shipment is last month. I mean, we are at the top of the wave.
Wow,
right
that's
now.
Great.
Yeah,
that's great.
There were a big wave in the 90s, thanks to the Japanese market, who collapsed completely, did completely disappear. Now we have two very strong markets for cognac, which are Chinese and America. Chinese drinking the old cognac, Americans drinking the young cognac.
Good.
Sorry, but it's very solid for cognac business.
Yes.
And I don't think it's going to change. I think there is really a future for a company like us who do luxury handcraft cognac, because I think millennials, maybe not now, but in a couple of years, they will have the understanding for this cognac. They will look for the information. They will want to know all the age, the vintage, where it's coming from, how it's made, how old is the company. So they will search for this information. And we see that with the Chinese, the new generation of Chinese who have access to this information. They are really interested by that. So I think I'm really confident for the future of cognac.
I think it's time that we start educating, more about what cognac has to offer and brings to the table, because it's a fascinating beverage for people to consume. I was talking about this idea from Armenia, and because Armenian, we are always, everywhere we go, there's a bottle of Ararat, the Noyak, which happened to be Winston Churchill's favorite brandy, and was given to him by Stalin originally, and now Pernod Ricard owns the biggest brandy factory in Armenia. So, but I just thought it fascinating. I'll read it to you again. But it sounds like in 1900, and maybe this expo doesn't exist anymore, at the 1900 Universal Expo of Paris, Shustov and Sons brandy was selected as the best brandy, and they were earned the right. So I'd like you to go back and validate this for me. This is important for me.
I think it's the first time I hear these stories. I'm not going to validate something.
You have to go dig into the library at Delamain and find out this is true. But that it seems unusual, but that the competition allowed the Armenian brandy makers to make and call it cognac. And then it says later it was revoked after World War II, and then the Armenian government. This one fascinates me because it's a very Armenian thing to do. The Armenian government unsuccessfully lobbied the EU for permission to use the term cognac, or cognac, K-A-N-Y-A-K.
Why not?
And so we would look at the bottle and say, "Oh, it's cognac," right? But yeah, I'd be fascinated to find out if you hear anything like that.
I will have a look. But
this actually leads a question. During the war, I have a lot of conversations with winemakers from Bordeaux and Burgundy and parts of France that were occupied by the Germans. Did Charente have that problem?
We were occupied, but the good thing about cognac is that if the business is shut down, or if you have to be quiet for a little moment, the cognac doesn't get bad.
Wow, what a great thought.
I mean, when you have wine, you have the harvest, and then you have the next harvest coming, and you have to sell the bottle because you can't keep them.
Right.
In cognac, you can just keep your cask, stop the business, and when you come back 5 or 6 years later, you will have your cognac, which is even better.
It's even better than it was, right?
But it's not exactly as it happened, because actually the German army needed a lot of cognac. So some of the cognac business became very big at this time.
Oh, that's what was good.
So it's another story, but we remain small. So
that's interesting. Particularly in wine, and I had a winemaker in yesterday from Italy. She's making her regularly convention wines, and then she's making her organic wines, and they're distinctively different styles. Hers were very good. I was very happy to taste them. And then I had a winemaker in from Napa who got a question from her, one of their clients, about whether or not the wine was gluten-free. All right, so we don't think of wine as gluten. Why would you, right? So she did a little research and found that their cooper was using a wheat paste, a grain, right, to seal the barrels. And I don't know if a person who's allergic to gluten would notice that in the wine, because it just touched it. It doesn't, it's not blended into it. And so they changed the cooper changed the barrels to a wax seal. Is cognac have any of those issues to deal with? Organic, biodynamic?
Well, yes,
gluten?
sure. There is a sustainability. There is we all try to have a cleaner way to do the growing of the vineyard. So this is a responsibility we have. In terms of gluten-free, we have zero gluten. So we have a certificate from our administration that cognac has no gluten.
Yeah,
no gluten. So this is a good thing.
Yeah, we put on the bottle.
You can put it on the bottle.
You put vegan probably, right? Because
so no sugar, sugarless,
sugar.
And
it's keto friendly, paleo friendly. Yeah, this is the best beverage in the world.
Exactly.
That's great.
No, but sustainability is very important. We don't do organic cognac at Delamain because we sell 60 years old cognac. So we have if we start now in our vineyard, it will be in 20 years that we can advertise it. But we are really cautious about that. This is really a subject for us.
So do you think that would change? I mean, fascinating conversation. You're distilling something which probably takes a lot of character away from that might have, like, for pesticide, if there are pesticides in the vineyard, or if there are other things, sulfur, copper in the soil. It seems like when you distill something, it's pretty much purifying the thing, is it not? At that point?
Well, if you have sulfur in the wine, you will find it after distillation.
Taste it, right?
You have to be careful. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
I know you have a busy day today. It's been a fascinating conversation to have you come in and just talk about cognac. You answered a lot of questions, a lot of personal questions for me, which I appreciate.
Thank you, Paul. I still have some questions to answer, especially about the Armenian.
Yeah, well, we have to figure that one out because,
yeah.
The reason I brought it up, and I sent this article to my brother-in-law. He's rather nationalistic in his, and he wants to invest in vineyards in Armenia. Mm-hmm, and he just came back a few weeks ago, and he showed me a picture of a vineyard. I don't know where it was, what part of the country, that apparently grows grapes for the brandy market. So, I want to ask you one other question. So he says, what do you think? And I said, it's hard enough making money in America in the wine business. I don't know how you're going to do it in Armenia. But the farming of brandy grapes in Armenia, I don't know how you would do it. I don't know what the rules are. He's going to embark on a project that's...
It's maybe time to invest.
Yeah.
Maybe
now. Right? I don't know.
Maybe now.
Don't tell him that. Maybe he's listening and I'll have to invest in it. All right, good. Thank you so much for the time today. I appreciate you coming out and having a conversation with us.
Thank you very much, Paul.
Have a bon voyage.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.